Hello and welcome to the Genuine Learning Blog. My name is Melissa Galasso, and today we're going to talk about a very important survey for all of you who are auditors out there that I'm going to encourage you to complete for the ASB, the Auditing Standards Board. So the Auditing Standards Board has issued a survey specifically around auditing of what we call LCEs, less complex entities. And many of the firms that I work with small nonprofits, very small governments, small private companies, and sometimes they find themselves trying to figure out how to take auditing standards and really scale them back to what is absolutely necessary for these smaller entities. And so the ASB, the Auditing Standards Board, is really trying to figure out what are the challenges that auditors face when they are trying to take GAAS in its full-blown context and apply it to these LCEs. This is in line with the work that the international standards are doing in the audit world, trying to figure out how do we scale, how do we make these audits make sense for these much, much smaller entities. And again, an LCE does not have to be a private entity. It can be a for-profit, a not-for-profit, or a governmental entity. And the goal of this survey is to be able to capture the experiences and perceptions of auditors who are doing this. And so it really is aimed at auditors. It's going to ask you some questions up front about how many entities you audit, what percentage of your time is spent on these types of organizations, and the industries that you serve. So this really is designed to only be for the auditors in the room. And the responses are anonymous. So they are not going to capture anything specific about you or your clients. They're just going to get a gauge for the types of clients that you are serving. And again, the goal of this is to think about, one, how they respond to the International Auditing and Assurance Board, the IAASB, and their work that they're doing on LCEs. And they are looking at potentially a standalone standard for LCEs, separate from full-blown IAASB guidance. And so the ASB wants to understand, well, what are our thoughts about that, as well as what would make sense here in the United States. And so they're looking for, again, for their own potential standard setting, but also as they consider their response to the international work that's being done. So what is an LCE? Relatively straightforward or simple organizational structure, not complex, not a lot of really difficult transactions or operations. The IT environment is not complex, right? Typically using QuickBooks or an off-the-shelf product. And they don't have a ton of accounting estimates that are subject to high degree of estimation uncertainty, or if it does, they're not using complex methods to do it, right? So those are our specific clients that we're looking at here. So the questions they're going to ask you about, first off, how scalable is current GAAS, right? Can you take the GAAS today and scale it down to your smaller entities? How does that work for you? Do you have concerns about tailoring your audit programs or modifying the work that you do to scale things down because of peer review? Do you worry that your peer reviewer will say that you haven't done sufficient work if you really pared down the work that you are performing? They also ask a lot of questions around the client's understanding of the levels of service. So they understand what an audit is compared to a review. They ask for information about, is a review sufficient for these entities? Why are we doing audits? If we are doing audits, do they add the additional cost benefit? Right? So when we think about these cost benefit types of questions, right, does the audit give them the assurance that they need at the price that we're willing to perform it at in order to meet the standards, right? So they'll ask some questions there. They also want to know about, well, can we keep current GAAS but just provide some implementation guidance? So is there a need potentially to retain GAAS as is, but potentially provide maybe implementation guidance or potential, practice aids, et cetera, specifically for LCEs from the AICPA? And then they even broach the subject of, do we need standalone little company GAAS? Right? We've talked about big gap, little gap for a long time, but now we're talking about little GAAS, big GAAS. And is there a reason that we should move down this path for standalone, again, LCE items versus the full-blown GAAS for maybe a larger, more complex organization? And again, this is asking your opinion. There isn't a right or wrong. They're going to ask you questions about complexity. Is it worth having two sets of standards that entities would have to learn? If you think about it, for some entities, they already have to do PCOB, and then they're doing GAAS. Do we want to add a third type of in there? Or is it worth it because maybe all your clients fall into this area? So again, they really want more information. And then they ask questions about what can they do? What are your suggestions for how they can ease the burden for these smaller entities? They're hearing the feedback. They really want to make sure that they're getting some ideas of what they can do about it. So they throw some out there and they're asking, does this work for you? Will this help you out? So here is a link to the survey. We'll make it available in the click below so that you can respond to the survey. The estimate is not going to take more than 20 minutes. In my experience, I didn't complete the survey, I'll be honest, because I'm not an auditor. I'm a trainer and my opinion doesn't count. But I did check out the questions so I could tell you what was on there. It didn't take me even 10 minutes to go through them. So again, answer the questions. If you're an auditor, it will absolutely be helpful to the ASB, and the survey is scheduled to close November 22nd of this year, right before Thanksgiving. So they will take this into consideration. The goal here obviously is to try to get as much information as possible. So we want to make sure that you are providing that feedback. I hear about it all the time about how burdensome some things can be. Share that with the people who can actually make a difference. So I want to thank you guys so much for joining me today on the Genuine Learning blog, and I hope to see you on a future blog. Have a great day, guys. Bye-bye.